We would like to begin session 3. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed your short coffee break. There were some technical issues due to the connection problem. I'd like to ask for your understanding. I would also like to thank you all for staying here until the very end of today's program. Now let us begin the third session on living heritage and quality education. In the session, there will be Ms. Susan Schnuknen, Chief of Unit of Capacity Building of UNESCO Living Heritage Entity as a moderator, as well as Ms. Adriana Molamo, Ms. Heila Rodziska, Mr. Yao Idu, Mr. Badri Bahaduru, as well as Mr. Samir Adar. So we have 3 panel members joining us on site and 2 panel members who are joining us online. So we will have a panel discussion with these 5 panel members. Please welcome them with a big round of applause.
Ms. Susan, you may have the floor. You may have the floor.
Thank you very much. And hello, good afternoon, good morning to those who are connected. I'm very, very pleased to welcome you to this session on living heritage and quality education. You already kindly presented us. My name is Susanne Schnutgen and I am from UNESCO. So the topic of today's session is living heritage and quality education. And we want to look at the connections of these 2 fields, living heritage safeguarding on the one hand and education on the other. And we want to understand why this connection is so important and why it is so important, particularly today, because, I don't know if you're aware, but UNESCO published a report on the futures of education. And in fact, they observed that really we have a learning crisis. Education systems around the world are not able anymore to meet the expectations of the learners, of the families, of the parents. What is wrong? What is happening? And what can living heritage actually contribute to address this learning crisis? This is the topic that our distinguished panelists are going to talk about today. I would like to quickly see, though, I think we're having the film before we connect the other panelists, sorry. Then let me just frame a little more our conversation. So we have the learning crisis, and UNESCO has started a couple of years ago a new program, an intersectoral program on living heritage and education, because we saw a strategic advantage for both, for the education sector and for the culture sector. For culture, integrating living heritage and education allows us to have a broader social approach to safeguarding. And from the perspective of education, it can help to increase the relevance of education. Relevance is a concept that is very important these days, and to help attain the sustainable development goals that Ban Ki-moon has talked about a lot this morning, and there's the number 4 on quality education and lifelong learning. So it's related with education for citizenship, sustainable development, appreciation of cultural diversity, the role of understanding the role of culture and development, and promoting mutual understanding and peace. So what can this connection between living heritage and education bring to these larger issues of this learning crisis? Yes, I think we can start with a little film like we did in the other sessions. we have a young facilitator from Ghana, no, from the Gambia, sorry, if I'm not mistaken. So, no, sorry, this is now the film, and then you go, yes. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Rohi LCC, an ICH support facilitator in the Gambia. Safeguarding ICH intangible cultural heritage is important to me because it is my identity. It will enable the younger generation to have an idea of their culture and heritage. One ICH element in my community I will love to discuss are traditional songs or indigenous songs. They are locally called Ngansin Denkilolu. These are songs that are meant to be sung on traditional events like wedding ceremonies, initiative ceremony, which is the passage of right to manhood. Each and every one of these songs have a connotative meaning. They meant something. The elderly people sang these songs to the younger ones so that they can teach them about societal norms, values, and ethics. Tambaude faran tambaude. Tambaude faran tambaude. These are songs for traditional chiefs when they were receiving the colonial flag at Tendaba. So each and every one of these songs have a connotative meaning. They meant something. One challenge of this ICH element is not being practiced by the younger generation. But I'm very sure if they are integrated in both our formal and non-formal education system, it is going to be very useful. When they are integrated in our formal education system, it is going to make sure that the living heritage does not die. The young people at school will have the access to learn about their societal norms, values, and ethics, and promote peaceful coexistence among them for the element to be safeguarded. When it comes to our non-formal education system, the community themselves, they are the experts. They know better about ICH. So when they have the chance to workshop, seminars, and awareness creation on how to safeguard their intangible cultural heritage, it is going to play a major role ladder in ICH safeguarding. Because ICH, our intangible cultural heritage, they are not taught in schools. We don't have the chance to learn them in our schools. And as a child in the Gambia, and I believe every other child in the world will be very glad to see that we learn about our culture, because if we do not know about our culture today, it will be hard for us to know where we are going, because if you don't know where you are coming from, your destination tomorrow will be somehow, because our reality, our identity is our culture. So we will want it to be integrated in our education system so that we can have access to learn about them, because right now they are not taught in our schools. One thing that worries me about ICH safeguarding is the issue of globalization. My question to the world leaders is, what are the current plans that you have at hand to make sure that our ICH elements are being integrated in our schools to promote quality education?
Wow, that's a powerful speech and a big question. Yes, applause. Applause for Rohi Sai, who is surely connected from the Gambia. This was a lovely video to set the tone of this particular panel. Could we now please also put online, see who is online. There is actually our colleague Ido Yao. So he's the director of the International Bureau for Education. Hello, Ido, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you properly.
Great.
Good morning, everyone.
Good. And then here to my left, we have Professor Heila Lotz from South Africa. Can you also hear us, Heila?
Yes, good morning, Susan. Good morning, colleagues. I can hear.
Great, great. I just wanted to check that you're well connected. Okay. We would like, though, to start with our speaker from Nepal, Mr. Badri Bahadur Tamang. Mr. Badri Bahadur Tamang, you are a teacher at the Mahendra Secondary School, which is a public school in Nepal, and you have over a decade of experience in teaching at different schools and colleges. And a little while ago, while you were English teacher at the Ganesh Secondary School, you became a team leader for a UNESCO project, teaching with intangible cultural heritage in schools in Asia and the Pacific. Could you tell us about the experience of implementing this UNESCO project, about the process and the impact it had on the students of your schools? please, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Susan. Nice to see you in person, although we had some online talks before. And I would like to, before I begin, I would like to thank UNESCO and the Korean government for creating such an context where the people around the world have come here and talk the very important issue here. And quality education, and here, what I'll be doing here is I'll be putting my focus on three major issues today as I'm asked a question. And for that, like, you know, I was one of the implementer, I would say the ICS practitioner of the UNESCO pilot project in Nepal. And so I'll be telling here why ICS in education is important. And I'll be also putting my focus on the process that we did, and finally the impacts that we had from the pilot project. So before I begin, I would like to again put the lights on the learning crisis of the UNESCO report. Why learning crisis? That's a question. So as a teacher, the question is very, very, you know, important, and that directly goes to my heart. And I think learning crisis is there, and from this project, what I learned, what I experienced is one of the reason of the learning crisis may be the gap, the disconnect between the family and the school. So I'm talking in context of formal education. So in terms of formal education, most of what we understand is, you know, learning happens only in the classroom, in a formal setting. And ICHCAP education, when this project was implemented in Nepal, it entirely changed my way of thinking. Oh, it's not. It's not just the learning in the classroom. So the classroom rules, classroom walls, maybe the dress codes, maybe the discipline codes, I think they are the barriers for the learning. So ICHCAP education is such a project that could bring, that could take the students, not remaining all the four walls of the classroom, but taking outside. So I think that is one of the best thing I learned, because as a learners, you know, they learn also at home, and they learn also in the classroom. But the things of the homes are not brought in the classroom, and that kind of gap is there. So ICHCAP education of the UNESCO project was exactly to bridge the gap, that gap. And when we talk, and then learning crisis, and today's topic is very important, quality education. Learning crisis, again connected to the ICHCAP in education. Then if we have to solve the problem of learning crisis, then for me, I think we have to take ICHCAP in education in the classroom. I think ICHCAP in education has to be taken in the classroom, because we have been talking about global citizenship, education. We have been to create the younger people to make the global citizen, so that they can build the knowledge, skills, and attitudes that they need to make the peaceful world. And again, it is connected with education for sustainable development. We are talking about social sustainability, and I found ICHCAP dealing with social practices, rituals, different events, different local pedagogical approaches, I think so, and also environmental sustainability, because ICHCAP will put focus on local approaches to conserve the biodiversity, and also local strategies to reduce the risk, especially the natural disasters. And again, I think for economic sustainability, in terms of traditional ways of life, we deal about traditional ways of life. We talk about craft making and traditional ways of agriculture, and also for the local products, we put much focus on local products, activities. And again, these days, we have found learners more aggressive and being more indifferent. So for that, we might need social, emotional learning. And I think taking ICHCAP in the classroom has been so important for this. And another most important thing I would like to put up on is the mother tongue education. And when we implemented that project in Nepal, especially we gave space for the local language. Our learners from whenever they get opportunity to foster their local language, then we found them being very proactive and very active. And so I'll be putting much focus later on it with the impacts. And now let me talk about the process. So for this process, it was implemented in Nepal in two very, very important municipalities, one in the northern side and one in the southern side of Nepal, of Kathmandu, the capital city of Nepal. And it benefited 473 students were involved, 13 teachers, 3 community members, 5 school management committee members, and 2 education officers. And first of all, different multi-stakeholders were there to talk about how to implement. And from our municipality, 2 schools were selected. I was Ganesh Secondary School is one of them, and I was from there. And I would like to remember my principal, Mim Kaji Shrestha over here, who just made me the team leader to lead the schools. And in this project, I was also very anxious. ICHCAP thing is something like in social studies or culture. How does it happen in mathematics? How does it happen in English or some other subject? I was very wondering in the beginning, but when we came into practice, different 3 teachers. I was one from English teacher, one mathematics teacher, one social teacher, and 1 community members, and 1 head teacher, of course, the school admin team, and 1 expert from the community. We were 5 in the team, and it was launched, and there was 1 NGO for helping us, and UNESCO observer was always there in every phases of learning and teaching. And then, how we did, first of all, we're given a training, we're given a workshop, orientation, right after the orientation. And then we have got to go for the framework. A framework was of a planning. Was something like, first of all, we were supposed to find the ICHCAP environment, finding the context, and then connecting the context with the living heritage, with the school curriculum again, and learning about the selected ICHCAP, and then we have got to design a lesson plan, we have to execute it, and finally we have to share our reflection on that. And one of the best things that I found for that is, it was, as a teacher, it was a COVID-19 situation. One of the challenges was that, and although we were not able to face-to-face, then there were lots of online sessions, we interacted and discussions, and finally we even dared to come together in face-to-face and did this project successful. And for that, one of the best things that I found over there was, when I make a lesson plan, I used to make alone. But when we made lesson plan for ICHCAP, then my core teachers were there, different subject teachers, we sat together, and then we were community members, we were experts with us for making plans. Of course, we had the learners and the school admin team, because we might need some budgeting and management, everything else. So everything, cooperation was there. And then, we did, and we selected one of the, for my school, I'm so thank you, because, in a head cover, this is the, in a head cover, if you have this one, okay, this is from my school. I'm so happy, and here we have the Nipuna Shrestha ma'am from UNESCO Kathmandu. I would like to remember her and thank her for covering, and I would like to thank UNESCO for covering our story. And here, what happened is, we used to make plans and student first. We were encouraged to put a student first, and then we made a plans, and to execute the plans, what we did is our learners, the students, they were directly involved in learning, teaching. For example, in my locality here, like Tamang culture, Tamang community, one of the indigenous community there, and we found the ICHCAP Lochar. Lochar is one of the celebration celebrated by that community. That's been New Year. And in that New Year, there's one special food eaten, kapse, and we connected it with maths, English, and science. Now the question is how we connected with social studies. Of course, they had the social costumes, they had the festivals, celebrations, especially we connected in curriculum with dresses, and the dance, the folk dance that they do. And with English, like, oh, okay, then the students went to the community. We gave certain questions, research questions. They went there, they talked with the community members, they collected the informations, and they made a, they made a kind of text and related to, and then recipe writing. There was a question, recipe writing, that Kapse, we connected with that writing skill. And then finally with mathematics, different shapes and sizes and the different the materials that they need. And finally, what was the, we made a kind of exhibition there. In the exhibition, we made up plans, and what were the impacts then? It gave us a better impacts on different stakeholders. We invited them. The students directly made the food there. All of the participants, they tested. And then finally, from this, what the conclusion that we drew was the classroom walls, of course, and the dress codes are the barriers for learning. We have to take students were so curious, and they collaborate each other. The so-called 21st century learning skills, the communication, collaboration, and the creative and critical thinking was there. They have high self-confidence. And the dropout rates, when in the classroom, they're very rare, and dropout rates were very lower.
That is really a big achievement, no?
Yes.
So it meant you managed to keep them in the classroom. We would love to almost take a course, I think, on how you did this. I think we need to move on because we are like several speakers. Maybe one last word on the impact. Well, you already said in the beginning, the biggest impact for you was that it was also a possibility to bring schools and homes closer together, have more meaningful learning. Maybe we come back to you when we are in the question and answer question. But thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Badri Bahadur Tamang, because I think you gave us right from the start a very concrete example of what this means. Bringing living heritage and education closer together and what it can do. Thank you so much. I would now like to turn from Asia to Latin America. We have Her Excellency, Miss Adriana Molano. Rebonjour, Adriana. Oui, je crois que ça marche automatiquement, en fait. So you are the Vice Minister of Regional Development and Heritage in the Ministry of Culture in Colombia. At the same time, you are a respected and well-known anthropologist and one of the leading experts in intangible cultural heritage in Latin America. You have led many, many projects on participatory cultural policy aimed at strengthening the social fabric of Afro-descendants, indigenous, and peasant communities from a heritage perspective. You also served as Director General of CRESPIAL, which is the regional center for the safeguarding of the intangible cultural heritage of Latin America from 2017 to 2020. And there you developed and you actually designed a tailored capacity building strategy for the region for safeguarding living heritage. Adriana, can you elaborate on how linking or articulating living heritage and education, how it can contribute to peace? I think this is an area you have been focusing on a lot in your work on education and living heritage, and we would love to hear more about it. What are the opportunities and current challenges in articulating living heritage and education with the objective of building peace? You have the floor.
Muchas gracias, Susan.
Thank you very much, Susan. I will speak Spanish because that's my mother language. I'll give you some time to listen to the translation. First of all, thank you very much. It is a real pleasure to find my family and friends from UNESCO. And thank you also to the government in Korea. I'm going to present the subject in three different points. First of all, I would like to speak a little bit about what is a culture of peace for us. Second, what is the relationship between the live patrimony and a culture of peace? And third, how we implement that into the education area. A terrain of culture on peace, this is something that we are elaborating. And we start by thinking about three types of violence. The first one is the violence of guns. We are unable to resolve a conflict, and then we move into the using guns. The second is the violence that is produced by inequalities. And this is the biggest one in Latin America and the world. We are not maybe able to see how inequalities produce a big level of inequalities, sometimes against women, against races, different races, against different social type. And third one is the cultural violence. And I don't think we are quite aware about how this violence impacts some countries like Colombia, Mexico, Chile. The narco traffic violence that has created in our young ones very violent ways. And that had created a question in us, the people from the immaterial patrimony, and how we can look for a peace culture. We are talking about reconciliation here. In some countries like Colombia, we have to speak about imperfect peace, because we cannot achieve peace if we cannot resolve these conflicts and violences. We have had during the last 20 years several peace agreements, and we are still struggling, trying to achieve peace. Regarding this peace, this gun peace, ex-soldiers would talk to us about disarm hurts, and this is not a cliche phrase. When you leave the phrase, you need then to find yourself as a person, how to become a member of the society. You need to disarm your heart, and that for that the patrimony, the intangible patrimony, is essential, because it is associated with spirituality, and this talks to the human being and the social being. It is very important to construct a new notion for people and communities. Facing this violence that inequality creates, we need to work towards these policies that are created by governments. And in that aspect, the intangible patrimony also has a main factor to play here, because it talks about diversity. And regarding the cultural violence, we're talking about the concept of cultural justice. Since from our point of view, this has a lot to do with human rights. How do we find a path to understand and value the immaterial, intangible patrimony that the other person right next to me possesses? We have seen on the field how the help of these of keeping this intangible patrimony alive is a key for resilience. There was a process, peace process a few years ago, 7 years ago. We were thinking at that time that we would achieve peace. There was a disarm process. 15,000 guerrilla members would disarm themselves. We had some areas where they would leave their arms and they would go into some communities who used to be their victims in the past. This was like a social lab for us. And we understood at that very moment that the intangible patrimony can be of the utmost importance to create reconciliation among peoples. This is how we created a very clear relationship between the members of these societies. And nowadays, this area is well known in Colombia because they have achieved peace between the former guerrilla members who would terrify the very area they are now living on. We have sometimes a better understanding of what intangible material is, maybe sometimes better than even the government. I have another example about that, and this is about a massacre. I believe this was 30 people in African, South American community. In the outskirts of Colombia, these rituals from the Afro-South American communities were forbidden. And these, there used to have rituals for funerary rites, and they would sing, and these sing were forbidden. And these very songs were forbidden. And this was terrible for these communities because this was the way they communicate with their ancestors. After these massacres, communities decided that the way they had to heal and the way they have to activate their own patrimony was to restart to sing this song. And they have reactivated this practice that is helping them heal. Another example I have is about the cultural reparation. The very tissue that was broken by the armed conflict or another kind of violence. In this case, we're talking about colonization. This is about an example we have experienced. And this was the return of some mask that the German government has returned to the Colombian government, the mask of Kogis from Santa Marta, which the government of Germany has decided to return. This mask has been spiritually cleansed, and they had also been reactivated through rituals in order to conserve. And they are very important, these masks, because they are used to conserve the nature. These very rituals have allowed this community to reactivate the relationship with nature. And the Colombian government has decided to leave these masks with the very people that they used to own them. This shows how the traditional knowledge from Aboriginal people are as important as our Occidental knowledge. And finally, a very important subject between the immaterial, intangible patrimony and the construction of peace is the government of the communities. Most of all, how do we bring to the forefront the voice of the communities, how they can express themselves regarding their economy and their culture, and how do we mix this with the education? I agree with my colleague here. We have been living in a crisis, a continuing, ongoing crisis for the last 100 years. And this shows us that we have a hard time integrating these concepts into the education. And this is the question I am asking myself. How do we face these violences? How we construct this piece? So do I still have time? Oh, I have an example. The integral being and the reduction of the inequalities on the educative and the school system. As we said, we have the informal and formal education, different categories. In these war zones, we have made some experience. Some of them are the most difficult areas of the country, like the Urabá, Antioqueño, and Urabá, Chowayo. In these areas, since the peace has arrived, we have created new schools where we bring theater plays and ballet plays where they discuss about these conflicts and we reflect about those very conflicts and this need to understand that this is not something that should happen again. These schools work about gender, they work with ecology and how this is going to define the territorial definition of these territories. And also the possibility of developing our areas, like instance in Mexico, the center of the Totonacas, where they have created their own school and their centers of transmissions. But we know that this is not possible everywhere in Latin America. Sometimes communities are not ready to do that. I want to talk about two other examples. One in Crespial.
I think we're running out of time, though it's fascinating to listen to you.
This was a work done with technologies in rural and urban areas. We wanted to bring the children to connect with the intangible patrimony. One of the first things we could understood it was that the parents did not like their children to work with the intangible patrimony. This tells us about how strong is the colonialism in the area. I will go into the conclusions then. So the diversity is helping the education.
And its territories and it's a culture of peace. It encourages learning and identity to be done through the contextualized processes. For the education, we need to consider the different social agreements into pedagogy and encourage these practices of restoring it. Culture, learning, culture presence in the learning is so important. That's why culture and heritage should be implicated in education. When we learn through a masterpiece or a piece or an art, it's better. It's something that should be included in the education system. Is an example of it. So there was a Truth Commission, and by law, it needs to be taken into education. What several schools have done is to extract the victims and generate processes with young persons, create theater pieces with these memories, and this is my last point.
Thank you very, very much, Her Excellency, Miss Adriana Molano. I think you really took us into a deep reflection on what the crisis really is and the seriousness of some of the issues we're facing. But at the same time, like we had in the previous panel, the notion of hope. I think what you shared gives also a lot of hope, because you have seen experiences where the power of intangible cultural heritage actually could help healing. And so it is a tool also for peace building as a learning process, maybe lifelong learning process, where intangible cultural heritage provides a space of learning in itself. So it's not only in bringing it into the institutions, but it's actually providing, ensuring that it can be transmitted to future generations so that the learning can happen. That happens through this, through the different intangible cultural heritage practices. And I think also you talked indirectly about the need for a diversity of approaches. You said that Tucanana, it's for some, it was possible in Colombia, it may not be possible in other places, but we need diverse responses, probably diversity of approaches, you know, to be able to support or to strengthen this linkage between intangible cultural heritage and education. But let me now turn to Africa, and there's Hela Lotz Sisitska, who's the Distinguished Research Professor at Rhodes University. You hold a chair in Global Change and Social Learning Systems at the Environmental Learning Research Center of Rhodes University, which you have directed for 15 years. You have contributed to many research and policy processes and programs, and you focus in particular on transformative learning and sustainability. With this work, you also collaborated quite a lot with UNESCO. You have done substantial research and project work on integrating living heritage in education, training educators, working with teacher training institutions and teachers. So Hela, what do you see as the major strengths and advantages of integrating living heritage in education? And more so, what do you think is required so that really we can take this work to scale, that it's not just individual projects, but that it gets anchored in education systems around the world? Please, over to you, Hela.
Thank you so much, Suzanne, and good morning to colleagues in the room and also esteemed panelists. I want to thank you for inviting me to this meeting. I'm very, very sorry not to be there in person, but at least I'm here with you online from South Africa. So a good morning to everyone. And I'll just start with just reflecting a little bit on our work with teacher educators particularly, but also teachers. I am in an education faculty, and so our main work is actually with educators. So working with teachers, teacher educators, and also educators that are not always recognized as formal teachers, but educators who play a very important role in communities. We've been working a lot over the years with educators to support them in order to be able to take on many of the new challenges that are facing our societies around the world. And so we've become very interested in, SDG 4, particularly target 4.7, which recognizes that culture is the foundation of transformative education and also, of course, sustainability and human well-being. And so for us, it's a very important area to be thinking about and to work on with teachers in order to understand the full meaning of that. And so we've taken, a strongly engaged approach in which we recognize the valuable role of teachers in our society, because our teachers are also becoming increasingly undervalued. And we see that teachers hold the key to quality contextualized education. But we also note that for this, they need to be supported very well from a systemic perspective. So I want to talk just a little bit about, that sort of space of the teacher, but also the systemic support that teachers need. So what we've been trying to do is to address this problem, and I think it's a problem in many countries, that culture, and especially ICH, is not well interpreted in the education system at policy levels, but also at practice levels. It's been neglected, largely neglected. It's been undervalued, and it's even been disregarded, particularly in countries that have been impacted by colonizations, such as many of the Southern African countries, in fact, most of the African countries and elsewhere. So this history of neglect, if I can call it that, and exclusion and marginalization has got ramifications for all education activities within the lifelong learning system and the work of all educators, and it impacts on the learning process itself, which is why it's so important. So this neglect affects learners' abilities to be successful in learning, and it leaves many, 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 many millions of learners alienated in and from the education system. And this is what I would say is a major learning crisis around the world, that learners are learning in ways that are alienated from their communities, their cultures, their families, and their life worlds. And this is a very serious problem. It's a very serious neglect. So we've realized, in our research that it's not only in SADC that this is happening, but it's happening actually the world over, as we've also heard a bit this morning. And one of the problems is that it's poorly articulated in national curriculums, and teachers, of course, have to teach the national curriculum. So if the national curriculum is poorly articulated or developed, then the teachers are left with an impoverished curriculum, which is how we're actually talking about it here. And of course, these areas are also absent in TVET system. So it's not only the formal schooling system, the TVET system itself doesn't have curricula that advance the safeguarding of ICH, doesn't develop the cultural foundations of learning well. And it also doesn't advance cultural development actually strongly in our societies, except in very, very limited ways. So we found that there are limited ICH study programs even in our universities, and there's also not enough support to advance non-formal ICH education. So we think that there's a very, very big area of neglect in the entire education and training system, including higher education, non-formal education. And so we think that, focusing in on the teacher can help us to, open up this big neglect, and then also look at how to respond. So one of the things that we've seen in our work with teachers and teacher education is that the power and the potential of ICH for advancing contextualized quality education is underdeveloped. And it also then leaves teachers underprepared for their role in working with ICH in education and for advancing contextualized quality education. And so it requires quite a lot of innovation in the work that one does with teachers, teacher educators, and of course one is always so amazed by the teachers and the teacher educators themselves as soon as they get involved in culture and ICH, how innovative they actually become as the school opens up into the community and the university opens into its community and the TVET colleges open into their communities, and you get this amazing enrichment of learning, education and pedagogy that unfolds. So we think that, teachers and particularly teacher educators are important to focus on because they're often neglected. So we have a lot of policy changes, but we forget that about the teacher educators who are teaching the next generation of teachers. And these teachers are the ones that also reach the learners. So there's a system there that is very important, system of connection that we should not neglect as we take forward this kind of work. And these teachers, teachers sit in the middle. They sit in the middle of much. They sit in the middle of between the children and the parents, between the schools and communities, between knowledge systems, and also what meaning making is for learners. A teacher is the one who sits at that interface. And so, they play this very important role in our societies. So what we've been trying to do is to think about how do we then support teachers in a more systemic way to do this important work, and also what is the rationale and how do we develop the rationale for that. So evidence from our work with teachers and teacher educators shows that integrating ICH in education contributes to an increased sense of belonging and pride in the community, to well-being. It's vital for peace building, as we've just heard, for global citizenship, as well as sustainable development. So it's very, very important for transformative aspects of our society. It adds relevance to education. I think Susan's already mentioned that, and we heard that earlier as well. But what is important is that it allows learners to conceptualize the world creatively and contextually from the cultures and the context of their life worlds, while it still enables them to explore the broader world that surrounds them. And this is very important actually for, success in what we mean by success in learning. So it's not, I don't think it's discussed enough, but there is evidence that ICH can increase learners' confidence in learning. In other words, their capabilities to learn, it strengthens relationality, it strengthens values development, it strengthens social emotional learning, cognitive development, creativity, empathy, the enjoyment in learning, which is so important. But, associated with all of this is that it strengthens learner achievement because it facilitates meaning making through the contextualization of learning. And given the context of education today, this idea of the learning crisis, I think we should not underestimate the significance of this. And so I think we must, just continue with the work of supporting teachers and, support them to, continue the work that they are doing and can do to strengthen language learning, science education, environmental education, arts education, and so on with ICH, as we've also heard earlier from in our panel this morning. So in terms of systemic, what needs to be done at a systemic level? And, we've looked, I think there's a lot to a system. There's different levels, of course, to a system. So I'm just going to quickly look at the level of policy. We think that we need much more advocacy and policy support and intersectoral cooperation, particularly between ministries of education and culture, but also the ministries involved with advancing sustainable development and peace. So ministries of environment, ministries of justice, and so on could also be involved in these discussions. We need capacity building for the policy actors, because policy actors themselves don't always have a good sense of the importance and the value of integrating ICH into education in all its levels, the TVET, higher education, schooling, non-formal, and so on. We also think that we need to support teachers to be part of localized curriculum development. So it's not only the policymakers that make curriculum, but teachers need to also be given space there. And then, of course, there's the non-formal educators, and to understand and also recognize them in society also needs, policy understanding of this work. And then if we want to mainstream and scale, as Suzanne was asking, we need to do this work at the policy level, but we also need to be developing the practice at the practice level. So the work of the teachers that we've already heard about today, how teachers both teach ICH and integrate ICH, how they cross boundaries between the formal and informal education spheres, how they enrich classroom experience with place-based engagements, and also how they assess meaningful learning as it emerges from the engagements with ICH is of course very important. And that involves also transforming our very concept of assessment and also success, and therefore also quality, what quality education actually means. It cannot only mean what comes out of a PISA test. It must mean what is important in learners' lives and their communities.
Thank
of course,
you
that
so
has
much, Hela.
implications
I
for
think we need to.
textbooks and I think I'm done. Thank you.
Sorry. No, please conclude. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to say, of course, there's a lot in there still in terms of pedagogy and assessment and many other things that teachers are responsible for. But ultimately, I think it's very important for us to give attention to the teacher, but the teacher in the system that it itself needs to transform around the teacher, not leave everything just to the teacher. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Hela, for this wonderful little presentation lecture on with so many ideas also of what we can do and conceptualizing this whole work of how we can integrate this more sustainably, the living heritage in education systems. I see that Badri Bahadur Tarang was actually nodding, so I suspect this spoke to you too, this experience from Africa. So thank you so much. I will then turn to our next speaker, c'est Son Excellence Monsieur Samir Adare de Maroc. So, Your Excellency, you are the ambassador, the permanent delegate of the Kingdom of Morocco to UNESCO, representing the country's interests globally in education, science, culture, and communication. You have advanced Morocco's international relations and promoted cooperation in different positions since 1991, when you, I think, became first secretary. We have now heard from voices from Asia, Latin America, and Africa, and you're here from the Arab States region. Your Excellency, your country in particular has been very supportive of integrating living heritage in education, notably through mother tongue and multilingual education, and including also local content within the educational curriculum. Could you tell us a little bit more about the experience and how mother tongue education, multilingualism is vital for the transmission of living heritage in formal and non-formal education context? Please, His Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Suzanne. First of all, I would like to say that it's a real pleasure and honor to be here. And I would like to thank the Korean government for its kind invitation. And it's a real pleasure. I'm thrilled to be here. And seeing the kindness of the people of Korea, I'm thankful to you all. Thank you very much. Well, I'm from a different background. I'm a diplomat, of course. And even if I had the opportunity last year to chair the 17th session of the committee, but with the experience and the huge help of my dear friend Tim Curtis. And I would like to seize this opportunity, of course, to pay him a tribute, because if this convention is moving the right way, is growing, and if we have more and more countries, member states on board, it's thanks especially to him. And I would like to say it today and in front of you all. Thank you, Tim. What I would like to say to answer your question is that 20 years ago, the international community recognized for the first time the need to support a type of cultural manifestation and expression that had, until then, no legal framework of this magnitude. Today, this commemoration, and I'm very glad to hear what I've heard today, because we have learned a lot, and I would like to thank you because you gave us the opportunity to exchange on very key issues, knowing that, as it has been said by Ernesto this morning, we still are in the middle of a process. We're still working on trying to create the best conditions to implement this very important convention. So we need to exchange. We need to try to emerge ideas from the contribution of everyone. And as a diplomat, I'm very, very happy that today I've learned a lot, as I am learning for 3 years now, as I am ambassador of Morocco in UNESCO, knowing that I have been, before that, from a bilateral background. I was ambassador from in Brussels, in Athens, in Cyprus, in Luxembourg, etc. But it's quite new, and I have entered a new world in UNESCO in the late 2019. And since then, I fell in love with culture especially, and especially with intangible heritage, because intangible heritage is interrogating our humanity. As it has been said this morning, it reflects and it sends us to our senses. Audrey Azoulay said this morning, of course, the intangible, you hear it, you see it, you smell it, you sense it, and you can touch it. And this humanity, it's very important. And we have to put this humanity in our educational system, which is very important. We have noticed these 2-3 last years that more and more people and countries are paying attention to intangible because it reflects our humanity, and it is more and more important. And thanks to the youth, you can see on the social media today the importance taken, but the intangible, it's quite amazing. And it's getting more and more important, and maybe it will overcome, it will be more important than the World Heritage itself. So we need to give them, we're not talking about money and means, but they need means and they need money to fulfill their duty, because it's going to take more and more importance. About the education, it is, in this regard, it is crucial to bring up one of the most essential themes that effectively links our culture and the identities as well as our future. That is, of course, living heritage and quality education. Living heritage, and I will come back to your question about the language in Morocco, because it was a very special and very amazing experience, by the way. Living heritage, which means practices, knowledge, artistic expressions and traditions handed down from generation to generation. It is an intangible wealth to the world and allows us to create unbreakable bonds amongst individuals and communities through the use of culture and in the hopes of strengthening our diverse human experience. As for quality education, it is the foundation on which the future of younger generations relies. It is the key to the gateway of knowledge and awareness, and it shapes responsible, critical, and tolerant citizens. These two pillars are essential, as they are for the development of our societies, can be closely intertwined and mutually empowering. The preservation of living heritage relies essentially on the transmission of practical skills. Orally or through demonstration, education is the main channel through which this living heritage is transmitted from elders to youth, providing a framework for practical and experiential learning of these traditional skills. It is in classrooms, workshops, extracurricular activities, communities at home and homes that traditional skills are transmitted, revitalized, preserved, and adapted to the challenges of the modern world. When we teach and learn about living heritage, we are doing much more than perpetuating ancient practices. We are, in fact, providing new generations with a deep connection to their roots, cultural pride, and respect for diversity. Quality education also promotes the safeguarding and recognition of traditional cultural practices, intangible knowledge and skills that are an integral part of a community's cultural identity, especially in a modern context where globalization and modernization can pose a serious threat. This educational approach also promotes mutual understanding, respect and tolerance for the traditions and values of other communities. It can imbue young people with a spirit of creativity and innovation, offering them the opportunity to interact with their culture in dynamic ways and to imagine new ways of honoring it and actively and positively partaking in its evolution. This is how we forge a generation that is capable of preserving its heritage and is aware of its importance in turn for future generations and in an inclusive and equitable way, free from all discrimination. The power of living heritage lies in its ability to foster respect for diversity and celebrate differences in accordance with universal values, and this is the spirit of the 2003 Convention. The integration of the living heritage into educational policies and strategies is now a necessity to meet the expectations and needs of future generations, all the while improving the quality and relevance of education, the appreciation of cultural diversity, and education for peace and global citizenship and sustainable development. And if you allow me, I'm going just to switch to French, just to give you some thoughts that I had during these 2-3 years, and that I want to share with the audience, but very quickly.
Il n'y a pas de problème, c'est juste, on est un peu pressé là, j'ai eu des...
D'accord, des alertes.
It's because
Non,
we're a bit
je
tight
voulais
for time. Sorry.
juste dire par rapport à la langue,
I just
vous
wanted
m'avez
to say
dit tout à
concerning the
l'heure,
language, as you said earlier
effectivement, on
on.
est passé d'une
Yes,
tradition orale.
indeed, we went
Vous
from
savez
an
que le
oral
Maroc,
tradition,
depuis
as you know,
2011,
Morocco,
ce qu'on a
since
appelé le printemps
2011,
arabe,
what we
a
call the
constitué
Arab Spring, made constitutional a second language, and it became an official language. And this official language, which is Amazigh, i.e., which covered by all of the Maghreb area, knowing that the Amazigh probably were there before the Arabs, except that indeed our laziness, cultural or institutional laziness, meant that we left aside this extremely important dimension of our identity, that we forgot it. Since then, over time, the pressure meant that we went from an oral tradition to a language today which has become officially inscribed into the Constitution of Morocco. And we're very proud of this. And this is where the question of education concerning the intangible is extremely important. And I will conclude with this. To ensure the serenity of societies, amongst others, on issues of intangibles, we need courage, and we need to integrate all of the dimensions of our identity, amongst others, the dimensions of intangible heritage, to be able to reflect the reality of the surrounding society and integrate this in its totality in the school curricula so that the next generations will be fully serene and fully comfortable in the reality of their identities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. That was a very emotional presentation with a great deal of wisdom. And the history of Morocco with respect to the language that you mentioned is quite extraordinary. And I'm certain that many other countries will be inspired to take similar measures. Well, we still have one more speaker, Mr. Yao Ido, who is the director of the International Education Office in Geneva, in Switzerland. Ido and I started at UNESCO at about the same time. And I was working in education at the time, and then I changed to culture. But we continued working together because we share this passion, this conviction that we'll only get to high-quality education if we bring education and culture together. And we'll only safeguard cultural diversity if we work together between these two sectors. So, Ido, we're very happy that through UNESCO's education work that you're here with us today. You know, you have a lot of experience at UNESCO. You were at the head of a regional office as director, and your presence is particularly important here today because your institute is responsible for the improvement of curriculums in throughout the world. And so we'd like to ask you a question. What do you think is necessary to sustainably integrate intangible cultural heritage in curricula? In your opinion, what should be done? And what is the best way to go about doing this? And what do you do in the education office for the purposes of this cause? So you have the floor, and thank you again for your participation in this panel.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the invitation. I'm very sorry not to be physically with you. I would love to do it, but unfortunately I cannot. But I'm very happy to join you online. And I would say that this is one of the positive outcome of COVID. We can attend meetings from everywhere. So I'm very happy to be here. But you said it, but let me say one word about IBE. The International Bureau of Education of UNESCO was created in 1925. In 2 years, we are going to celebrate the centenary of IBE based here in Geneva. And our mandate has been, the last UNESCO General Conference asked us to work mainly on the education quality improvement in UNESCO member states through curriculum transformation. And about your question, I would like to say that the first thing that I want to say is that integrating living heritage in education is a key step for the decolonization of education. Remember, during the Transforming Education Summit in New York last September, Antonio Guterres, in his speech, said that we must decolonize education, namely in Africa. So integrating intangible culture heritage in education is not simply important. It is a vital and indispensable to have a citizen educated but rooted in their own culture with some specific identity, but at the same time open to the modern and global world. For instance, in Africa, a critical analysis of formal school indicates that schools are the cemeteries of African local cultures, starting by the most important intangible heritage of an individual, his language. I will take only my personal experience. When I was in primary school, for instance, in a rural area, in a small village in Côte d'Ivoire, we were totally forbidden to speak our local language in school. We didn't have the right. We were allowed to speak only French, and those who were found speaking their mother tongue were severely punished. And as we all know, language is the best vehicle for any culture. And banishing a language means burying the cultures and values that go with that language. So some intangible heritage like initiation ceremonies in Africa, traditional beliefs and religious practices are considered as backward, and those like me who attend, I would say attended formal school, we become condescendent vis-a-vis some intangible and living heritage of our community. So, education is for us the best means to value, promote, and safeguard the living heritage by awareness. And a living heritage is, I would say, a very rich resource for any country to achieve sustainable development. You said it, one of the panelists said it earlier. By working through a good articulation between formal and non-formal education, education can be key for intergenerational transmission of living and intangible heritage. I would say that integrating living heritage in education can favor the following. First of all, it can increase the quality of education by making lessons more relevant and more context-specific. One of the panelists said it. The second is that it can reconnect school with the community around them. In some areas in Africa, for instance, when you go to a school, the school has no contact with the community. There is a cut because the buildings are very different from the local buildings, and the language is different from the one they speak. So there is no, the school does not belong to the community. So we think that by integrating living heritage in education, it can help to reconcile education, schools, and the community. It can also foster the respect and appreciation for cultural diversity and strengthen the sense of belonging of a young man to his community. And the last thing is that it can also connect students to their past and can strengthen students on how to. My second point of your question, how can we, what needs to be done? I would say that as a UN specialized agency for culture, UNESCO is tasked with safeguarding living heritage and ensuring its transmission through generations. This can only be done through formal and non-formal curricula and programs. So what is IBE doing in that sense? As a global institute in charge of curriculum and in the framework of the decolonization of education, my institute is working on the promotion of indigenous curricula that value and ensure integration in education of local cultures, traditional knowledge, tangible and intangible heritage, and also the use of local languages as medium of instruction in teaching and learning. We are also in this indigenous curriculum promotion valuing the knowledge of parents. You know, some parents in rural areas, they have a lot of wisdom, a lot of knowledge, but they are not given any opportunity to share that in school. So the school is there, they don't intervene. We think that we are working on promotion of indigenous curriculum that will allow parents to have a say in the education of their kids in school. But we have to give them the opportunity to contribute to the knowledge building of their kids. In our promotion of indigenous curriculum, we also connect learners to their local values, identity, context, and also revitalizing the difference between, by reconciling the global culture and the local one. IB is pushing for living heritage to be part of official school curricula or extracurricular activities. For instance, for pedagogies, we propose more flexible curricula so that the teacher can contextualize by identifying and promoting local knowledge and living heritage through his teaching. But today, curricula are so rigid, the teacher cannot even touch anything. And we are advocating for more flexible curricula that can enable the teacher to come in. Another thing that we are supporting, for instance, in Côte d'Ivoire, there is in one region, there is one living heritage that is called Chologo. It's a traditional ceremony of initiation, after which a person is called a man or a woman after 2 weeks in the forest for training by elders. And in that region, what is interesting is that the owner of this Chologo, who are traditional leaders, they are invited in the classroom to come and share the knowledge, the values behind this traditional heritage. And it's producing very good results. It's bringing young people to really be interested in what is going on. This practice is one of the best ways to safeguard the Chologo. In Indonesia, students are taught about batik. This is a type of handcraft textile through subjects such as chemistry, history, and art. So this brings the young people to really be interested in the batik, which is a very important living heritage for Indonesia. In Mexico, for example, also, a guide for teachers of indigenous education includes lessons on personal and community identity and living heritage. So this also brings the teachers to really address the issue of living heritage. Finally, in the advocacy of my institute, we work with member states. We urge the member states to, first of all, integrate living heritage in core curriculum subject. It has to become a curriculum subject in the programs. Secondly, we advocate so that heritage specialists are invited to school to share their knowledge. Thirdly, we are also proposing and pushing to develop and make digital heritage related to information more accessible and more user-friendly on social media for the youth, with some videos and explanation on the importance for the kids. Because one of the best challenges, and this is my last word, is that the youth today, they don't see the importance of living heritage. They don't understand. When they go to school, they become condescending and they think this is background, this is outdated behaviors and beliefs, and they don't believe in. But if we are able to explain them how this living heritage can contribute to their own education, how it contributes to build a man or a woman who is rooted in his culture before being open to the rest of the world, I think that more and more the youth will be interested, because the big challenge is how to interest the youth. And that's why I was saying that the presence of living heritage on social media through ICT is key, because as we all know, things that are on TikTok, LinkedIn, WhatsApp, etc., are the Facebook, are things that interest the youth. So how are we maximizing the presence of living heritage on social media is key to make it happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ido, for this great journey or story about living heritage and education in Africa. And it's funny because your last sentence is sort of bridging the panel of today with tomorrow's panel, which will be on living heritage in the digital environment. So we will refer back to what you were just saying, because I think it's very true, in fact, and I think we've seen that with others also. I know we are, I wasn't strict enough, I think, with time. You all spoke a bit longer, but it was so interesting. And I looked at people, nobody seemed bored. So I thought, well, I think your presentations were just so strong that I didn't want to stop you. I have a question to the organizers. Can we take 1 or 2 questions, or is that still possible with the interpreters and so on? Well, let's just do that. If there is, I can take 1 or 2 questions. So there's already one over there. Ananya, please, yes. Can you also present yourself, especially for those online who weren't here earlier, because you spoke in an earlier panel?
I'm Ananya. I'm coming from India, and we are from an accredited NGO working on culture and development. I'd like to share 2 challenges we face and hear from any of the panelists whether they are facing it. One is the issue of language. In many of our indigenous communities, the languages are oral. There is no written script. So the choice of having education in that language does not exist practically. So those languages are dying. So has this been a problem? And the other is our communities are diverse across the world, and we are in the age of supra-diversity. So we have very mixed, diverse communities in all our countries. So is there any risk of pushing in the majoritarian culture, among others, in the name of ICH education? So these are the questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any other question before I give the floor to the panelists? Yes, there's one over there. Please, maybe while we get the mic to you, I already let maybe Hela and Ido could respond to this question first. Hela, would you like to do that, to respond to Ananya's question? Hela, can you hear us? Or maybe the connection is now no longer there. Ido, would you like to answer to the question that Ananya posed?
Yes, I think that the point she raised about the dying of some local languages is a reality that we know. You know, UNESCO has been working on protecting dying languages. We know that many languages are dying for lack of preservation. Let me take the example of, there's one language in South Africa. I don't remember the name, but the panelists in South Africa will tell us the language where we speak, we make it. There is a click, and this language, there are 3 more speakers of the language, and they are all above 70. So if they die, it means that that language is going to die. The best way of preserving it is to make it as medium of instruction in education. And this is what we are pushing for in UNESCO, the promotion of multilingual education, valuing all the languages, making sure that no child starts school in a language different from the one he speaks at home or in his community. For instance, let me take the case of Africa. Africa is still the continent where 8 children out of 10 start school in a language different from the one they speak at home. And we are promoting multilingual education because the use of mother tongue is the best way to really promote living heritage. Because the living heritage in general is possessed by people, native speakers, and they don't speak French or English. So if we are able to promote their language in education in the early years in primary school, these people can be invited to come and properly share their knowledge of living heritage, because they are the owners of the knowledge on learning heritage. So that's why we are pushing, and we think that is one of the best ways to make sure that the living heritage is really promoted through the multilingual education and the mother tongue education.
Thanks a lot, Ido. So let's take that question. There's one last question before we close, but you didn't get the microphone. Is that the issue? Where is
it? The mic is given to me, so I
have
have a question for the panel. Thank you.
I didn't see you.
My name is Abdo. I'm from Brunei Darussalam, very near to Korea. My question is, how can we ensure global quality education under SDG 4 is more than just pedagogy in formal education? Because we have under informal education and non-formal education, things like andragogy and things like enculturation of cultural heritage needs to be highlighted and needs to be counted into achieving SDG goals. Thank you.
So do I understand that was more a comment, no, or a plea that we should do this? Yeah, thank you for that. And then why don't you just come over and I give you my microphone if you like? Because she's bringing it, okay. Yeah, we have to stop, exactly. We stop now.
Hi.
Okay.
So hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pam, and I am from Thailand. I'm currently a graduate student at Chiang Mai University, majoring in ethnicity and development. So actually, my question, I would like to address my question to Director Yao, but actually, he has already has got some questions, so it is open for every panelist to answer. So my question is about that. When you mentioned about that, the living heritage is like youths nowadays, they no longer interested in their own living heritage, right? But actually, as far as I understand, ICH needs to remain relevant to the community because it represents their own identity. So I just want to know, like, how can we, in the field of education, overcome this dilemma of youth not like interested in their own living heritage, while we, as adults or elders, are trying to like pushing this to their minds. So thank you.
Would you like to answer to that? Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. I think this question is very interesting, at the same time quite challenging to answer. And of course, this kind of diasporic situations are the learners, especially the learners of the from the indigenous community, learners from the marginal communities are in this kind of context. For me, like what I would say is, I'm also the one who is facing this kind of situations. So I think the best way is to integrate the both cultures, since we have been talking about the global peace, since we have to respect each other. And that is what I found in my practice in the classroom. When we were talking about one culture, I mean, the ICS element of the one culture, the rest, another culture were very much interested with that. Wow. And then, you know, when we were doing another thing, and they were also celebrating that. So, and I think that is the main motto of ICS in education. So integration, I would say, is the best way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was a very clear answer. And I would like to say a big word of thanks again to all the panelists. Big applause. Yes, thank you. Thank you, by Badri, Adriana Molano, Kayla Lotz, the ambassador from Morocco, and also Ido Yao for your, for this rich discussion. And I think I hand over then to our organizers.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your discussion. That was very inspiring.
Thank you very much for the panel discussion. We talked about recognizing cultural diversity and raising awareness on the importance of ICH and the integration of ICH with education. This is really important, especially when we think about promoting intangible cultural diversity going forward for the next decade. This is going to be critical. With that, we would like to wrap up day one of the global meeting of the 20th anniversary celebration for the convention. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us until the end of day one, and I will see you again tomorrow morning at 9:30. Thank you.